The Chicago Bulls made a move yesterday that kind of everyone was expecting since the offseason began, and that was waiving Marko Simonovic. The next question is up, is how are they going to use the newly open roster spot, and who are some of the candidates that the Bulls could use to fill that spot, as well as what assets are still at the Bulls' hands to really use to flesh out this roster. We're going to talk about all that plus hype the Summer League right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize. You guys can follow me right off the top at CEO Haize, at CEO Haize. You can also follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform that we happen to be on. But let's go ahead and get into the topics for today. So, as we all know, dropped a special episode last night. Right when the news happened yesterday afternoon, as far as Marko Simonovic and him being waived by the Chicago Bulls. Now, it was kind of the writing was on the wall. Marko, who was never able to really get on the floor in meaningful minutes, playing only 16 games. And while, yes, this does put more of a question mark around the Bulls development program or drafting, right? Marko Simonovic was a second-round pick. Most second-round picks do not work out. Now, that does not mean that Marko can't go away back to Europe or stay in the NBA if another team is going to pick him up and maybe have a better development plan. Keep in mind, we do now have a head of player development, but that was a recent signing and acquisition just a month or so ago. So the main part of the Marko Simonovic being here, his time was in the G League. Now, the G League can be used to develop people. I do not want to make any mistake about that. Hell, we have a player that's a key part of our rotation, Alex Caruso, that did have to come through the G League. But ultimately, Marko Simonovic, I guess, just never showed the Bulls enough, even though, looking at the G League numbers, he played pretty solidly in the G League too, amazing at times, and really looked to be a scoring and rebounding big at that G League level. But even at times last season where we needed size, where we needed rebounding, where we needed an additional big, the Bulls never went to Marko. And I think that meant that the writing was on the wall for him. But now with Marko being waived, the Bulls only have two centers and only two players above 6'7" on their roster. And so the question is, are the Bulls going to use the open roster spot that's now open by Marko Simonovic to go after maybe a versatile forward or add some needed depth in the big area? Now, of course, Mo Bamba was one that was rumored to want to come to Chicago. Ended up not working out. He goes to Philly. Shout out to him for that. But that still does leave Bo, right? A player that a lot of Bulls fans right now have been talking about. It leaves options like a Christian Wood, a PJ Washington, a Kelly Oubre, Paul Reed, even though Kelly Oubre is not a big. Let me be clear in that. But the Bulls have options there to add players. And honestly, Paul Reed I kind of like as an option. Again, this is to replace Marko at that minimum salary. This is not a disabled player exception signing, so let me be clear there. So Paul Reed, when you look at him, 6'9", 210 pounds. He's played 133 games in his NBA career with averages of only 4.2 points per game, 3.8 rebounds per game, 0.7 blocks per game, 59% shooting from the field, though, and a terrible three-point shooting percentage at less than 30%. 20% is less than 20%. So, he could be somebody that the Bulls could bring in to replace Marko that has been able to play at the NBA level. That is the key thing here, right? The open roster spot left by Marko Simonovic is something that you want to look at because you don't have to replace it with a world beater or anything like that. You have to replace it with somebody that you can actually use on the back end of your bench if some injuries come around. Now, that disabled player exception, of course, is where you want to acquire the bigger names at. And really, the Bulls, when you look at it, we have quite a bit of avenues that we can use to add still talent to this roster. When you look at it, we still have our biannual exception. We still have the disabled player exception, right? If granted, which may even be the day that's granted by. I had expected to be granted before we head into the weekend. It may not be. Maybe we don't get word on that till Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. But the disabled player exception, which I doubt we'll have trouble really getting, we have that. And then, we still have part of our mid-level exception as well. So the Bulls have assets to still add to this team. When you look at it, we have 12 players on the roster right now. Now, that's not including Ayo Dosunmu and Carlik Jones, who both have, right now, Ayo Dosunmu's on a qualifying offer, so we don't know how that's going to shape out for him. And then Carlik Jones has an option much like Marko, but his date is much closer to the start of the season, so they can really kind of let that go all the way to the start before they decide. I really do not expect Carlik Jones to be maintained. I know Bulls fans, especially after him winning the G League MVP, some people really have him pegged as like kind of the next one up. Carlik Jones is not good. He's not a good player. He's not an NBA prospect. There's a reason he's been through the G League. Yeah, he can shoot, he can score, but hey, welcome. We've seen players that can do that before. Antonio Blank didn't ring any bells to anybody, but ultimately, I do not expect Carlik Jones to make that the roster. So that basically leaves 2 roster spots right now open for the Chicago Bulls, right? Theoretically, they can open up 2, they can open up 3, especially if Ayo Dosunmu signs elsewhere. And the Bulls have assets to be able to add players at that position. And so, I think that the Bulls go more big than they do the guard rotation. I've seen some of you guys in the comment section, bring things up like, hey, we need another point guard. I highly doubt the Bulls go point guard right now. I don't think that point guard is going to be something that the Bulls really are looking to kind of do much with right now. When you look at our depth chart right now, right? So Javon Carter, probably the starting point guard there. I know some Bulls fans disagree there, but then you have Javon Carter, Kobe White, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic. Right now, probably shaping up to be our starting 5. I would not be surprised at all if Torrey Craig may even push for that starting power forward position if Patrick Williams comes in passive. I hope not. I want to see Patrick Williams come into training camp, go through preseason, and shows that he deserves and he's earned that starting power forward position. And I hope that that's the case. But when you look outside of that, that leaves our bench at being Alex Caruso playing backup whatever. He can play 1 through 3, right? He's kind of that player that is going to be all over the court. Kobe White can play either guard position. They've even played Kobe White some at the 3. And then Dalen Terry, right? And that's the biggest question mark right now is because you don't know how they're going to view Dalen Terry, right? We don't really know that. We expect and hope that he's going to come into the season and be given minutes in his second season after being the least played 18th overall pick in NBA history, right? And we've seen the upside of Dalen Terry. We've seen the facilitating. We've seen the shooting, right? We've seen the defense. We've seen the energy. We've seen the athleticism. We've seen all of that. And hopefully that is Dalen Terry comes also in the training camp and shows that he deserves that role, right? But then you also have Torrey Craig, who can play 3 and 4. You have Andre Drummond. We have a lot of versatile players. Drummond is the one that's he's just a center, right? We know he's just a center at this point, and that's perfectly fine. But when you look at everyone else, even if you have Kobe in the starting lineup instead of Javon Carter, you have a backup list right there of players that can play multiple positions. If you add in Ayo Dosunmu with that, his combo guard mentality, he can play a lot of positions there as well. Terry Taylor, he's still on the roster as of right now. We need to see how that's going to shake out for the Chicago Bulls. But ultimately, what the Bulls, I think, would be looking for are versatile players that can play. You got your 2-3. You got a couple of them, right? You got your 3-4 in Torrey Craig and potentially even in Terry Taylor. Now maybe go out and get a 4 or 5, right? So we'll see what happens with the Bulls roster. I think still a lot of questions as we still go through free agency, but there are still a lot of options available for the Chicago Bulls as well there. When you look at, like I said before, and especially as we go further into free agency, we are now past the first week of free agency, right? By the weekend, we'll be through the first 10 days of free agency. Christian Wood's still out there, right? Not even really very many rumors on what he can get. Now, while I don't think Christian Wood is perfect for this team, and I really don't think he's perfect to play next to Vooch, maybe next to Drummond if you can do some things there. PJ Washington is definitely a young player that I would love. Now, he would absolutely push somebody out that depth chart. If we were able to get a PJ Washington who's a restricted free agent, you're probably at that point looking at PJ taking minutes away, projected minutes away from Dalen Terry, right? At that point, you're probably not going to see Dalen Terry very much in the rotation like we hope for. Now, you do have a job as a front office to improve your team where you can. You guys know how I kind of feel on the development and competing now. I want to see this team start actually developing their own players once again. But again, PJ Washington would offer up a definite solution for you that can be the 3, be the 4, right? That can start if Patrick Williams is still being passive, can definitely start in that case. He's been in the NBA 4 years. You kind of know what he is, but still has a little bit of upside. Kelly Oubre, I know he's one that's been brought up a lot. And while his shooting ability could be sorely needed for the Chicago Bulls, especially if you look at having him be the backup 3 behind DeMar DeRozan, there's a lot of possibility there. I don't like Kelly Oubre overall, like his defense, and sometimes he falls asleep. And even, sometimes he could be a very streaky scorer. But again, Kelly Oubre, surprised he's still out on the market. I already mentioned Paul Reed. Kendrick Nunn, if the Bulls do decide to go guard, like some people are mentioning, Kendrick Nunn could be another one that the Bulls could look at, because when you look at his averages that he has over his career, over 12 points per game, could be a solid 39% three-point shooter. But again, I don't necessarily expect the Bulls to go guard. That's just my personal opinion. I think ultimately, especially if they bring back Ayo Dosunmu, the guard rotation's done. Like, we have so much depth at the guard rotation. Yes, we don't have a lot of the true facilitating setup point guards, but again, in this type of team, especially off the bench, I don't expect that. But, so that's kind of where the Bulls sit right now. A lot of questions still left to answer. A lot of potential roster spots open. If Ayo Dosunmu gets a large contract offer sheet, I don't know if the Bulls match it, right? I just don't know. We had a video on that on the channel earlier this week. And ultimately, I think that the Bulls look at their assets and the value. And while I still think there's tons of potential in Ayo Dosunmu, I know a lot of Bulls fans have completely turned on Ayo. But when you look at Ayo and just the defense that he showed in his rookie year to come in and earn a spot, right? The upside that he still has as a defender, even if you're kind of down on this offense, I understand that he's, missed a lot of layups at the rim, right? Can't deny that. But, I still think there's tremendous upside in Ayo. And so, especially while we're questioning the Bulls' development plan, especially with a player like Marko, who was just never really given an NBA opportunity, but one could say that he never really earned an NBA opportunity either. I just hope that the Bulls, find a way to hold on and maintain on the Ayo. That $5 million qualifying offer may be the best he gets. We'll see. A former target that the Bulls all liked in EJ Liddell, just signed a 3-year, almost $7 million deal. So, I don't know. The market on Ayo is one that's hard to gauge. He's still on the list of top free agents available in most of these outlets. So all it takes is one team that's left holding a lot of money, that's left to be a team that, doesn't have playoff aspirations, to kind of offer Ayo an offer sheet that the Bulls just can't match. But, ultimately we'll see. But I think the Bulls rotation is starting to take shape. And while a lot of us Bulls fans do have hopes and, have these targets that we can do or that we are looking at, it's just a lot of it doesn't seem feasible, right? Like, you can only play so many players. And if Dalen Terry is going to earn a role, and the Bulls very well may be still evaluating that, right, in their decisions, we'll see. And I think, like I said on yesterday's episode, I still think that there is a high chance that disabled player exception is not used until maybe at the trade deadline, maybe during the season. Maybe the Bulls see something, a player becomes disgruntled, something like that. That's kind of the most likely outcome that I see for it as we get closer to this. But hey, while you still have players like a PJ Washington, while you still have players like a Kelly Oubre out there, a Christian Wood out there, hey, talent is talent. And while, they don't necessarily, all of them aren't the perfect seamless fit, you gotta go to a talent where you can get it at. Now, before we go to that, I do also want to talk about Summer League. The Bulls Summer League schedule starts today, which means that I will be having a live post-game show for the Bulls Summer League game. We're back on lives. Summer League is kind of used as a tune-up, a catch-up, because I miss you guys as well, so make sure you guys stay tuned in for that as well. But looking at the Summer League roster, man, there are a lot of players on this Summer League roster that are cause to really kind of watch and see. Julian Phillips, while we're talking about the Bulls depth chart, right? Julian Phillips could be a player that, if that defense is legit, like the head coach of the Summer League team said, he talked about how important his defense could be. If that defense is something that's solid and ready to go, I fully expect him to be trying to push to get rotational minutes for the Bulls next season. I just do. The defense is the one thing. As much as us as Bulls fans, we like to say, hey, Billy Donovan isn't going to play you. We've had 4 young players come through here with Billy Donovan. Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu played right away in their rookie season. Marko Simonovic never got a real chance. We've seen that. Dalen Terry, although we said because of his game that part of his development plan was to be in the G League, and we'll see what that means for him this upcoming season. But one thing that we have seen with the players that Billy Donovan has played right away, it's been because of their defensive acumen, right? And I do think that Julian Phillips' defense, with everything that I've seen in tape with him, everything that's been hyped up, it could be the level of defense that Billy Donovan may see is worth getting some rotational minutes, right? Adama Sanago, not necessarily saying that I expect him to play. He's on a 2-way contract. He's kind of replacing Marko Simonovic in a way as being one of that G League prospect that really is going to take some time to develop. But you look at what he did at the collegiate level and you say, hey, this guy absolutely could be ready to go sooner rather than later. I look at Adama Sanago kind of as like a less athletic Taj Gibson with a better shot early on. So Adama Sanago could be another one that the Bulls look at, right? There are some players down there. Justin Lewis still down there as well, a player that the Bulls, another one that they signed on draft night as an undrafted free agent. And yeah, he tore his ACL, but as you guys saw with the post-side clip, he's dunking. He's looking ready to go. There are players that are trying to make their name for themselves and get into the Bulls rotation and that are potentially at positions of need on top of all that as well. And so if that works out for them, they could push, right? So the Bulls could then look to more so let's see what we got with them, right? And then if something doesn't shake, if these players aren't what we need, if we think we're close enough to maybe make that push for a fifth, a sixth seed, let's go ahead and use that disabled player exception for a trade. That could be something that comes. But this Summer League roster, again, for basketball purists, Summer League basketball is fun during the summer. So make sure you guys check it out. Like I said, we'll be live for it to break it down. But that's it. That's my time for today. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the show. The number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.